That's our job.
Welcome, everybody. And thank you for coming here to this first conference of SIyafana Sonke campaign. Just in terms of the people that are here, maybe let's just introduce ourselves and then I'll actually go through the program to tell you a welcome. Okay. Welcome everybody. My name is Manuel Tresibeni. I'm the coordinator alongside a lot of these colleagues of SIyafana Sonke campaign. So, just in terms of program, we're going to have welcome by Comrade Ifan, and then I'm also just going to be facilitating the program today, as well as doing the demands later. We have Comrade Zaki Mamdu, who would be explaining what is our campaign all about. We've Comrade Tessa, who would be outlining the humanitarian crisis that has developed across the country. And then there are also colleagues joining us actually online that will be bringing on from time to time, just to give us up-to-date account of what is happening in various regions across the country. But maybe let's just do the introductions. Come just briefly.
Good morning, everyone. Tessa Dooms from the Rivonia Circle. I'm part of the humanitarian response team coordinating here in Joburg in particular. And of course, there are nodes across different parts of the country.
I am Koketso Mwete from Amandla.mobi, which is also part of the SIyafana Sonke campaign.
Mohamed Osbey, I'm attorney at law for human rights, president of Gender Industries Workers Union of South Africa, and the coordinator.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zaki Mamdu, a shop steward at General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, and also an executive committee member of the Workers and Socialist Party.
Good morning, everyone. Irfan Mangera. I work here at The Hill, just an activist and community organizer. Thank you. Colleagues and friends, it's a privilege to be welcoming you to The Hill. As somebody who is deeply concerned about what's going on in our country, I think this is a space in which we carry both the pains of the past as a reminder of how hate and policy that is rooted in hate can actually affect our country, but also as a space in which hope often arises. And that's as a result of the Constitutional Court and the work to uphold human rights as enshrined in our Constitution. And as we commemorate 30 years, we know that this opportunity and this moment is not just for reflection, but to take action to make sure that the lived reality of everyone in this country is taken care of in a way that upholds our dignity. So with that, a warm welcome. I hope this is an opportunity for us to keep furthering human rights and make sure that all people are protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Jeffrey. I think, colleagues, just to outline the purpose, and I think I'm going to be calling Comrade Zaki, and I'm told you are doing the humanitarian situation.
No, that's all.
Oh, that's okay. I saw her look at you when I said she's doing it. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole purpose of this conference, obviously, we'll be outlining in detail who we are. But I think we must be very clear upfront. We are here to say what is happening in the country does not represent all of us. The idea that we can be, I mean, scapegoating migrants for the crisis that the working class has every single right, and have every right to be angry about. The levels, I mean, the catastrophic levels of unemployment, the levels of poverty that has been deepening, the falling standards of living and the cost of living crisis that has created unprecedented levels of desperation, that are also finding an outlet in criminality and violence, but also the crumbling public services, healthcare, education, housing that has left up to 13% of the people in this country living in conditions of complete squalor and degradation of informal settlements in shacks without dignity of water supply, of electricity, of sanitation, just complete horror of those living conditions. These are reasons for the poor and the working class to be angry about. But these are also not reason to be blaming the poor amongst us and to be scapegoating them in a way that we have seen in the past few weeks. There is just nothing heroic about what is happening, because many people are looking at the disparate situations where our people are being dehumanized in centers to which they've been displaced. Many have run to the bushes. Others are living in pavements, makeshift concentration. I mean, camps. That's the only way that you can describe what is happening there. People are being robbed. People are being assaulted. People are being killed. And in that condition of terror, many are living in their troves in what you call voluntary repatriations, which is actually people fleeing in mass as refugees, by the way, right? And there's nothing heroic about that, because before people want to say that this is a success, this is a victory, it is always, I mean, it's very cheap, it's coward to be targeting the poor and the vulnerable. I've had a singular privilege of fighting amongst men and women in this country that have faced and confronted the most powerful interests that have monopolized the private ownership of our economy, the mining industry, the land, that are responsible for all the failures of the past 30 years. I've been part of that at Marigan in 2012. I've seen people face a fearful odds to confront the mining monopolies in demand for the better life, decent wages for themselves, and the good living for their families, better living conditions in mining areas. We've been part of those organizations at level of workers, at levels of communities. We are fighting alongside movements, of the poor in informal settlements, alongside, the likes of Abahlali, which is supposed to be here. Comrade Melida may be on the way. Movements of the most poorest, 180,000 people in informal settlement that are organized and have been on this crisis of the house of living. People who have seen many of their cadres being killed and dying for struggle for dignity, to demand housing, to demand services that they are entitled as a matter of constitutional rights. We have seen people fighting in the Fees Must Fall movement, demanding an access to quality, public education for all. Those are the people that have confronted the elites in this country and dared to stand on their feet in a struggle for dignity and all of that. People who are targeting the poor, there's just nothing heroic, and if anything, is very cowardly, and I think it must be called out. We are also here to say that we absolutely reject the deadline of the 30th of June, which is tomorrow. There is no such deadline so far as we are concerned. There will be migrants in this country. They will be living amongst us. And of course, the only thing that has to happen is how do we make sure that we defend them better than we have in the past few months and few weeks and days, which has seen many of them fleeing and so on. And I think these are the issues that have brought us here today and to outline what people could be doing, because many people don't agree with what is happening, but I think they have been terrified because of a mob justice that we are seeing in social media, where there is, people have been trolled and terrorized. And I think the message needs to be sent loud and clear. We are not going to be intimidated into submission. No matter how much intimidation and how much trolling they try in this media, right? And quite frankly, even if there were to be majority, we don't care, right? Hitler in Nazi Germany could fill the stadiums. Was he in majority? We can debate that. But today we remember men and women who stood up in the face of that tyranny and said, no matter the hysteria that was created there, it was wrong. It was the same thing, in Rwanda and all of that. So we are not going to be threatened and intimidated into submission on this particular matter. This is a matter of fundamental principle, and that is the basis of our movement, that an injury to one is an injury to all. The people being terrorized are our people. We claim them as ours, and we are them. Nothing is ever going to be changed, no matter what kind of narrative is being put or the terror that is being tried to use to get all of us to submit to that. Comrade Zaki is just going to outline who we are. And of course, I'll be calling Comrade Teza after that. And the intention is to try and keep it brief. I just had to try and say, why are we here?
Sure. No, thank you very much, President. I'll try and be quite brief, but just to give something of an overview of who and what the SIyafana Sonke Action Campaign is. Come join us here.
Comrade Melita is from Abahlali Basemtondolo. Is a movement I was speaking about.
Yeah. So the SIyafana Sonke Action Campaign emerges out of a public online mass meeting that was held on the 9th of June, which saw widespread participation from various community civic organizations, trade unions, NGOs, and civil society in general, really who came together to share a concern around the escalating threats against migrant communities in this country and vulnerable communities, including, of course, threats of coordinated action leading up to, on, and after the 30th of June by what really we have characterized as right-wing, xenophobic, and reactionary formations. And it was participants at that meeting who expressed deep concern at the growth of organized intimidation on the streets, of online hate campaigns, of vigilante activities, pulling children out of schools and blocking, ordinary people from access to healthcare and clinics and all of these things. And of course, the increasing normalization of hate and of anti-migrant politics in public discourse across the country. And so The campaign, or the members of the meeting and the organizations attending and who convened it, including Mining Affected Communities United in Action, that is Makua, including Abahlali Basin Jondolo, including the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, among others, resolved to launch a campaign which was subsequently endorsed by over 160 organizations, which emerges from the urgent need and necessity in the current moment to confront the rise of Afrophobia, the rise of xenophobia, the rise of the politics of difference and the kinds of ethnic chauvinism, of local chauvinism, of tribalism, which flow from that and which we are beginning to see take root in South African public discourse and in our politics. And really as well, the campaign emerges as a result to defend unity of the working class, to defend our ability to actually fight, the core crises that confront the working class and the poor in this country, which are driving, the extreme levels of inequality, of poverty, the collapsing services, the levels of unemployment, of violent crime and things of that nature that indeed plague our society. And like President Mametlo Sebei correctly pointed out, crises which the working class in this country have every right to be absolutely furious and enraged about, and should be organizing around, but must organize around on a proper program and on a proper basis. And so the campaign emerges from that, right? It recognizes that our social crisis has reached a breaking point in this country, right? Mass unemployment, collapsing services, corruption, hunger, crime, poverty, inequality, unaffordable transport, deepening insecurity have produced this legitimate anger within working class and poor communities and across the board in our society as well. But we have to draw the line, because by no means are these crises caused by migrant communities in our country. They are not responsible for the crisis of collapsing services, etc. Refugees and poor people are trying to survive, and we can't allow the scapegoating of those communities. Indeed, we have resolved that the crisis we are confronted by were produced by those with power over society, be that both economic and political power. And those are political elites, those are the big businesses, corrupt officials, profiteers, and of course an economic system that has abandoned millions of people to poverty, to unemployment, and to despair. We recognize, of course, as well that xenophobia, Afrophobia, ethnic chauvinism, tribalism, local chauvinism, and vigilante politics offers no way out. It offers no solutions. By all means, mass deportations is not an economic policy, and it's not going to resolve the crisis. That kind of politics is not going to create jobs. It's not going to reopen factories. It's not going to fix our municipalities. It's not going to end austerity, nor is it going to be able to hold the powerful to account. And we worry, I think, all of us here, and indeed all of us across this country should worry that once that politics is unleashed, it does not stop at the border. It will turn neighbor against neighbor. It will turn worker against worker, poor person against poor person. And therefore, our campaign is rooted in the urgent need to organize the legitimate anger of our communities, of workers, of the working class and the poor in this country, away from division and toward the real causes of the crisis itself. And so I'll conclude just very quickly by outlining the 6 core principles that inform the basis of the SIyafana Sonke action campaign. And those are the 6 principles that the over 160 endorsing and supporting organizations have subscribed to, and it informs the basis of our unity in this current moment and our call to action as well. The first is that we reject xenophobia, we reject Afrophobia, racism, tribalism, ethnic chauvinism, and all forms of scapegoating. Indeed, no community can be liberated by turning on another oppressed community, and no worker can advance by attacking another worker. The second is that we defend the unity of all who are exploited, impoverished, and excluded under the current system. We know South African workers, migrant workers, unemployed people, informal traders, shack dwellers, women, youth, students, and poor communities in general have a common interest in fighting against the unjust conditions that are imposed onto them. The third is that we recognize the legitimate anger of working class and poor communities. And we know that people are right to be angry about unemployment, about crime, about corruption, about hunger, about collapsing services and the cost of living. But that anger must be directed at the real causes of the crisis and at those who hold political and economic power over society, not at vulnerable people with the least amount of power. The fourth is that we oppose vigilante violence, intimidation, and fascist methods. There is nothing democratic or progressive or community-minded about pulling children out of schools, about blocking people from clinics, threatening informal traders, and attacking migrants or terrorizing communities. The fifth is that we fight for jobs, we fight for services, we fight for dignity and justice for all. The answer to the crisis is not deportation, it's not scapegoating, it's certainly not street thuggery. The answer is decent work, functioning municipalities, quality public services, and an end to austerity, of course, accountability for corruption, investment in our communities, and an economy that serves people before it serves the profits of a select few. And the last is that we build solidarity from below. So under the banner of the campaign, we recognize that our strength lies in our organized communities, in our workplaces, on our campuses, in our faith formations, our social movements, our trade unions, our migrant organizations, our youth formations, civics, and all democratic forces acting together to confront the real causes and the roots of the crisis, confronting all of us in this country in this current moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we're moving to Comrade Tessa, just to give us an overview of the humanitarian situation. I'll also be inviting Comrade Melita to also just add to that on the basis of what's happening in Visa and other areas. Comrade Tessa.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll give an update on how we are experiencing the unfolding humanitarian crisis that has resulted from migrants who are fearing, really fearing what is happening already in the communities and what may happen tomorrow in the coming days. And I want to preface this just by saying that what we have not seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks through the lens of media or even social media, and quite intentionally so, is the levels of intimidation that are increasing in communities, in township and Shakdwala communities. So just today, one of the community organizers who works in the Freedom Park area, who works and lives in that community, was supposed to be at this briefing today, but is not here because a group of people wearing MK regalia is going door to door in Freedom Park today, trying to find if there are migrants living in any of those houses in backyard dwellings, and also intimidating people who are landlords to people who are migrants. That kind of thing has also happened just yesterday. We saw it happen in Kliptown as well. And in Kliptown, what was even more concerning was you saw that people from outside the Kliptown community came in a group of about 300 people who are not from Kliptown, descended on Kliptown and did a march through Kliptown in which the message that came to the community of Kliptown was, we will be back and there will be bloodshed if you do not present us with the migrants to leave. And it's that level of intimidation. We've seen video clips, we've seen people coming to get humanitarian relief, bloodied and beaten at this point. And that intentionally, when groupings are doing this kind of thing at community level, they're not videotaping it, and they're threatening people who try to videotape it. And so I just want everyone to know that there is a silent and deliberately obscured version of intimidation. And that's why you're seeing thousands and thousands of people who are ending up in what we're calling these makeshift concentration camps. People are not just leaving voluntarily out of the goodness of their hearts. For some people, I will say that for some people, they are in South Africa in conditions that are exploitative to them. And so they see this as an opportunity to leave. But for many people, it is also under the direct threat of intimidation at this point, and that needs to be called out and understood. What the consequence has been, and we've seen the Sherwood situation, is different versions of that are starting to emerge in different parts of the country, including in the city of Johannesburg. The humanitarian response there needs to be that we are trying to keep track of where people start to gather and convene. A lot of times it's around the embassies or consulates, but sometimes it's not. And finding where those people are convening is one of the first things that we're having to do. And so we do ask that if people do see convenings of people that are gathering, that are trying to be repatriated, please do let authorities know. Because if you have those large gatherings of people get bigger and bigger without anyone knowing, there are two possibilities that we've seen unfold. One, of course, is that people start to gather there with children, with women, with medical conditions, etc., and food and water are required at some point. But the second is that, again, groups that are anti-migrant will find out where people are, and we've seen confrontations where they'll go to where people want to be repatriated and actually further create tension in those areas. And that's not only bad for the migrants who are trying to be repatriated, it is also bad for the community at large, because we don't want communities who want standoffs with each other. The second thing is then for the cities, in our case, we've been trying to get the city of Joburg on board, but all municipalities need to be involved in the humanitarian relief. Disaster management is something that locates itself within cities. Cities have those capacities, they have the resources, they should be providing that. And to say that it's not their business because these are migrants that may not be able to vote for them, because that's the only logic that would make sense at this point, is not sufficient, because there is a broader community effect if we do not have a response. So we call on all mayors across the country to be ready with disaster management in order to assist with relief. At the level of national government, we're also making an appeal to the Department of Social Development and the Department of Health to get involved with the repatriation and deportation processes. Lindela at the moment is oversubscribed, overcapacitated, and should not be handling repatriations at all, but is stepping in to do so because we are at a crisis mode. The various embassies, some are more organized than others, but they are also lacking in some of their capacities. But one of the things that we found is that the South African government's national response has been around Home Affairs and SAPS, the Department of Justice, to a limited extent. But what is really needed is for social workers to be on the ground, for people from social services to be on the ground, for people from health to be on the ground. We have just this week in the city of Joburg had 3 babies whose mothers went into labor on the streets while we were trying to sort out repatriation, and a baby that was practically born in a car because we did not have enough medical support to be able to assess people. So we're asking as well that the state get involved and have a much more coordinated effort when it comes to humanitarian support. We have had many humanitarian organizations join into the SIyafana Sonke action campaign, and I want to thank every one of them. There's been a really big pour out. But just one of the things that stood out for me yesterday was the realization that in normal circumstances, when you have a fire, when you have any kind of humanitarian relief, churches and schools are usually happy to have their buildings used for people who are vulnerable. Right now, churches, church leaders, and schools are telling us they are too afraid to house migrants in their spaces because there's been threats that people who house migrants in their spaces while being repatriated and vulnerable will have their buildings burnt down. And that's things that we're hearing directly from community leaders. So again, just appeals to everyone that we do not create more and more tension, particularly when there are vulnerable people trying to repatriate. The majority of people that we are seeing are women and children. In front of the Malawian consulate, last night we counted 55 children below the age of 1 year old that will be sleeping outside without intervention. So the crisis is growing, and I'm really appealing that we ask people just to keep the temperatures low.
Thank you very much, Com. I think that is a very gruesome situation you're describing there. Comrade Malita is here.
what is happening on the ground? My name is Melita Ngobo from Abahlali Basemjondolo. What is happening now on the ground since the march in Tembisa, where there was a march on the 18th? There is a lot of crime that is happening around. And then there is a lot of fear that is around the township because we have hostels. And when we have hostels, the people from the hostel, they don't take the people from outside as the people. And the fear is that when they come out on the 30th, they are going to take away our homes. They already take some another lady's home. The lady's from Guyana. His husband is from Mozambique, and then they already demanded that when the tenants pay rent, they must pay or they must pay to them, not to her. You see that this is a very dangerous thing, and the problem is that the police, they don't even look around what is happening. They're just listening to their words when they say the march is peaceful. While it is not peaceful, it is very dangerous. Things that are happening out there. We really appeal to the police, more especially Tembisa South Police Station, that if it can, the police can come out and make sure that they are around during the day and during the night. I think we will appreciate that.
Thank you, Comrade Melita. In fact, I mean, what Melita is describing, Comrade, is something that we were increasingly getting, that behind this movement is also people who basically just want to dispossess people of their assets. People have already identified homes that they just need to take, shops, and many assets. So there are local cartels and syndicates that are being incentivized in all of this. And the leaders of your march and march, they will say, we are not about that. But let's be clear about it. How else do you force millions of people who have run away from war-ravaged countries and societies, economic devastations, where there's basically no jobs, no hopes, people who have left their homes because of levels of desperation we can't even begin to imagine, right? How are you going to force those people out without terror? So the idea that they can deny, the means where they're embracing the end, is just disingenuous and dishonest, because they know very well that marches alone are going to push people out of their homes. People who have stayed here for decades, who have built families, who have built, livelihoods, all of that. They know very well that the only way that you can achieve that is through the kind of violence that has led to, rampant killings across the country. We know that we can pretend it's not happening, but it is a reality. It is a fact. And that violence, those murders, those assaults, those displacements, all of that are functional to the achievement of the objectives of this particular reactionary movement that we are seeing. So there are a number of comrades that are online joining us from Western Cape and Durban. I don't know, how do you call them? I don't know, how do you connect with them? Are we able to recognize call comrades from Western Cape, Comrade Tariq? Okay. Are the comrades from Cape Town and Western KZN there? Okay. I think let's proceed. We will just defer questions about the situation in those areas to them. I think just in terms of our demands, we are absolutely very clear. And I think Comrade Tessa has begun to touch on those. The fact of the matter is, there is a humanitarian crisis at the moment. And first and foremost, it requires the relief effort. And that means there are people that are displaced across the country. Number of children have been, born on the streets in pavements, and in this, makeshift refugee camps that have been set up spontaneously without support, without any help on the part of the state. When we met with government, we underlined that there must be an intervention by the state to ensure that people that have been displaced are actually, supported in terms of food, in terms of water, in terms of medication, in terms of any other life necessities. I think that call remains. The government has said to us they were going to outline measures in that respect. I've heard in their press conference, but I've not really heard the specifics, but also I've not heard from any of our local activists and groups that are monitoring this situation as it's happening in Western Cape, in KZN, parts of Gauteng and other parts of the country. I've not heard them say this is what government is doing by way of humanitarian relief and effort. And that's a problem for us. And I think we demand that. Number of, civil society organizations, gift of the givers, number of communities, particularly I must say that in Muslim communities, I've seen lots of humanitarian response, I think, that need to be lauded and appreciated. But also many other faith-based organizations, Christians and but also NGOs and community activists, all of that, I think they have been making an effort. Those are lauded and those are encouraged. We are calling more people to step up, but I think we're also, and most importantly, demanding that the state must actually do its fair share, which should be the main share of this humanitarian efforts. Secondly, we are saying that this cannot go on, right? We cannot have a situation wherein people are being assaulted, people are being killed. The state has the responsibility to make sure that every single person in this country, migrant or South African, documented or not, they are safeguarded. And I think that is true for tomorrow, but also that is true for any other day, today and beyond tomorrow. And one thing that is very clear is that most likely tomorrow in the demonstrations, you're not likely to see that violence in the official demonstration. But you're not likely to see is what happens in townships, in villages after the official demonstration. You see, when March and March leader says after the march, there are people should go into their communities and enforce the law. That is a coded language. They know what they want because they know that without that violence, they can achieve any of this. So what they are saying in a very coded language is that people should go on a rampage and engage in a forms of violence. That is the only way that they can terrorize the migrants to leave their communities, their homes, their families, but also the country as a whole. We can't have this situation that Comrade Malita was describing, where now people are taking homes of people, where people are, just taking houses outside the normal process of the law of transfers of property. People are reallocating themselves, puzzle shops and so on and so on. We can't have that situation, right? And we know that firstly, that is just an unacceptable and a blatant violation of human rights. But also that's how you basically destroy the economy. And people can't keep pretending we haven't been down this route. We've been down this route in this country in July 2021, but also we've been down this route internationally. Let's remember that in this continent, Idi Amin, these methods are the methods, the tactics of Idi Amin in Uganda. He went around, you can go and look at the videos, him going around chasing the Indian Ugandans out of their shops, out of their homes, giving them the deadline. So every single tactic that you see happening of the deadlines, of repossessions, of dispossessions of homes and businesses that are just being allocated in a criminal fashion that you see, that is worthy of gangsters and criminals, that is lot are. All of that has been done in Uganda. It's taken from the textbook of Idi Amin. The question is, what happened to Ugandan economy after that? Were Ugandans left better off? Absolutely not. If anything, they were left, they were left worse off. And we know, just as we can boldly predict here, when this vigilantism begin to create chaos, people are losing jobs, and things are getting worse for South Africans. These a lot are not going to come and say, we were wrong, we are sorry. They are going to have to find a next scapegoat. The question we've got to be asking ourselves is, who is next amongst us? Today is migrants, and I see lots of people are supporting them. But I can tell you, it can only go on and on, because I know lots of South Africans who don't even agree with this. Many of them are basically taking an ostrich approach, where basically they want to bury their heads in the sand, hoping it's a storm that will pass. It never does. They are going to find new scapegoats, and before you know it, we are in complete conflagrations. This has got to stop, and we are saying that the state has got to do its part. Because the fact of the matter is, police, by their absence, but also in many instances, literally heading these mobs as they are doing these acts of violence and criminality, they are complicit. And we are charging them of complicity without equivocation and ambiguity in our position on that. So government has got to hold them accountable. But this is all the more reason we're making a call, right? As SIyafana Sonke, we have absolutely no faith in the state, which has created this crisis at all levels, from the conditions of unemployment, the conditions of looting and plundering, savage neoliberal cuts on services, and all of that, but also a failure to police this crisis when it started and hold these criminals accountable. That is the reason we're calling on community activists and communities and families to stand up for their communities. Migrants are our people, and we shouldn't be gaslighted into thinking that they're the other. They are our people. This thing that every time somebody is assaulted, we have to say is South African, is what is a human being. And in this situation, they are Africans. We know that for the fact that these are people that have been targeted. So people, we are calling on community civics, on trade unions, on every single movement of the working class, people who have been on the coalface of the struggles around these issues, from housing, from unemployment, issues of crime or violence in our communities, drug problems, human trafficking, all of that. People have been organizing on this, to organize to stand for the people that have been scapegoated, people that are being violated, that are the migrants. So we are saying people must organize community defenses everywhere, and make sure that they only organize humanitarian efforts, but also they fight and, of course, challenge and oppose these groups as they do that. But also we are demanding arrest prosecution and accountability of the people behind this violence. We have seen videos where even some of these so-called leaders of this movement are assaulting people we can say. The question is, I've seen, my organization, quite correctly, by the way, has taken them to court on the question of their LGBTQ, the discrimination against LGBTQI. There is a court order, which obviously we support. But the question is, why are we also not prosecuting them for the assault of migrants? Have we accepted this as new normality ourselves? We can't. Cases need to be open. People need to be prosecuted. And of course, for this, but also for their incitement and inflammatory language and all of that. And I think overall we say that nobody here says that there is no legitimate concerns around the issues of documentation. Every one of us want to know who lives in their community and so on. And the people who are concerned about this above all are the migrants themselves. Think about the life without documentation in this country. You can't open a bank. You can't access public services. You can't do what? I just left the Office of the Laws for Human Rights. It's people that are there, and I can tell you they're not just coming now. They've always been there in their hundreds and thousands every single day, looking for documentation. People that are being evicted from their homes and that are being displaced are documented, many of them. But even those that are not documented, many of them are having applications for documentations or applications for renewal of the documentation that is lost somewhere in a bureaucratic incompetence, corruption, and collapse of Home Affairs services. And that has got to be dealt with. We have got to find ways in which we can regularize the stay of many of our people that are without documentation, but address this in relation to migrants, but also in relation to South Africans themselves. Millions of South Africans are without documentation. And I think that is important, and I think that needs to be highlighted. But I think also, Comrade Zaki have said, we've got to deal with issues around our industries. Manufacturing year in, year out is in decline. Mines are in care and maintenance everywhere. Farms are lying idle. Construction industry has collapsed. These are millions of jobs that we need in mining industry, that we need in factories, that need to be reopened, mines that need to be recapitalized and reoperationalized, but also a public works program that should be there to ensure that we provide decent homes to 13% of the population in informal settlements, to ensure that we build the schools that are needed, so that every child is able to have an access to quality public education, to build clinics and hospitals so that we are able to make sure that there's a quality public health care that is properly and adequately equipped, staffed, but also supplied with medication, all of that. Comrades, I think that basically would be the outline of our demands. I'm just going to open it for questions. And of course, we have a panel here, as well as people that will be willing to take questions from the floor.
Good morning, Nomfuyo Ntanjana from SABC News. Outside of the children that you mentioned that have been pulled out of schools and the death of the, I believe it was a Mozambican national. I'm not sure if it happened in Northern KZN or Cape Town, but outside of that, I'm interested to find out how the group arrived at characterizing the recent events as xenophobic. Maybe if you can give specific events. Also, you said deportation isn't the answer, and the aid being offered at camps isn't enough. So according to the group, what do you see as the best way to deal with the situation of undocumented foreign nationals in the country? Or are you saying it's a situation that must not be dealt with at all? And my last question, maybe if you can outline areas where you've offered aid and what sort of aid has been offered.
Thanks. Lou? I'm especially interested in Johannesburg, what Johannesburg's, I mean, there's so many issues here besides what's going on. And do you think that there's been a bit of stoking in terms of the language used by those officials?
Mohammed Bam from Radio Islam. Just two questions. The first one, how much responsibility do Herman Mashaba and Gayton Mackenzie bear for the current tensions given their long-standing anti-immigration rhetoric? And also, March and March supporters say their critics are motivated by economic interests linked to undocumented foreign nationals. How do we respond to that?
Hi, I'm Jo Bluin. I am from the campaign, but also from South African Jews for a Free Palestine. And I'd like to ask the panel, we know historically that individual journalists and media houses have been named for complicity in pogroms, in genocides, in mass atrocity, for stoking it by use of language. So given that we have so much of the media here, and I'm sure many of the journalists don't want to end up in prison, like what should we all be thinking about in terms of narrative and in terms of what is being reproduced to avoid stoking more violence? Thank you.
Koketso Moeti from Amandla.mobi, also part of the SIyafana Sonke campaign. Over the last couple of years, for a very long time, both individual journalists, and we have seen it from politicians as well, using the language of dehumanization that has helped bring us to this point. Herman Mashaba himself once referred to people as Ebolas, as diseases, right? And this has continued. We see it also reinforced in the fact that people are described as illegals, as if your mere existence is illegal. It is this type of dehumanizing language that gets us to the point where some are not seen as fellow human beings, and it is acceptable to treat them in the ways that they are. It has to stop. It has to stop across our society, and it has to stop being normalized. And so part of the call here is also to say to individuals, for those of us who are against the dehumanization of people, we have to understand that we have to not use that type of language, and we have to stop it in its track and hold accountable those that do. I want to come back to the point, why do we characterize this as xenophobic? Over the last couple of months, both online and in person, we have heard some of these vigilante groups directly, explicitly say that they are targeting people because they are not South African. That cannot be characterized in any other way, where a specific group is targeted by virtue of the accident of their birth. That is xenophobia in action right there. And I want to bring us back that it actually, this dehumanization hurts us all. To give you just a few examples, every wave of violence, right, has also resulted in South Africans too being hurt. And just to bring it to life, last year, a former colleague of mine, Palesa Ramolefo, needed to use a clinic in Soweto. And during the time, March was disrupting the clinics, trying to keep illegal people from using the clinic. What happened is everybody who was at that clinic was unable to access services. The patients were then redirected to Chris Baragwana Hospital. But because of the sheer volume, no one was helped. People like Palesa had then go see private healthcare the following day and. I'm just using this as one example that when you attempt to sift through people and say some deserve, some don't belong, some don't deserve, we are all hurt in that process, right? It dehumanizes us all. And we have to say it is unacceptable that this is happening. And again, for a country of our history, I want us to remember this year marks important anniversaries, right? 30 years since the Constitution, 50 years since 1976, and the list can go on and on. Opposition to apartheid, our people weren't opposed to apartheid because they wanted to just end segregation. Our people risked their lives and fought tyranny because they were demanding a South Africa in which the dignity, humanity, and belonging of all is recognized. We may have gone off the path, as has been described. Wages have stagnated, inequality is high, and. But we cannot allow vigilante and organized hate groups to undermine the dream that was being fought for by reinforcing lines of who doesn't belong and who doesn't deserve, because ultimately it hurts everybody, Black people in particular, who mostly rely on public services in this country, and.
I'm going to address mainly the questions about government and the humanitarian, but I just want to add just to the question about the characterization here. And I think for me, what's important is that you can address the issue of immigration without directly targeting a migrant. And I think that's the difference. We can say we have issues, we have an immigration crisis, and go to the immigration processes, systems. The SIU is giving us information. Home Affairs is being exposed, all sorts of things. I would expect our collective effort and ire to shoot up at power, not shoot down at migrants. And I think that's the difference here, is that we are taking out a gun and a missile, and we are saying that there is a huge systemic crisis of immigration. And mind you, my view about this is that immigration is the issue that got us here today. But given the poly crisis in this country, it could have been unemployment by itself. This could have been about healthcare. The country is so fragile at this point with the many crises that people are dealing with a failed government, that any match lit could take this country, any match. So for me, this is about us focusing on the broken system rather than on each other. Because if the focus is the migrant, the individual migrant, then we are not fixing the system. And I think that's the thing that we're trying to point out. And that's when it becomes about the xenophobia and the hate and all of those things. Because imagine you are an individual migrant. You have no control over the system. You're not even part of the criminals, because we all agree here that criminals should go to Brook. Whoever they are. I don't care what criminal you are. I don't care what your nationality is. All criminals in this country must go to jail. But I'm not the police. And so my job is to make sure that the police functions, the Madlanga Commission works, so that we actually have a police that we can trust to go and catch the criminals. But if we all become the police and we all try and catch each other, that's how we're going to burn this country even faster. So that's part of why we are really focused here on, we all agree on the issues. What we are here talking about is strategies and tactics, and not turning our gun down to people who are vulnerable and turning it up. The second thing I want to say about it is that I think that the leaders of March and others have gotten to a situation now where, again, this country is very easy to burn. It's very easy to catch a light. Last week, former President Kgalema Motlanthe said something. He said the only reason why this country has not burned up organically by itself right now is because spatial apartheid keeps people far enough away that they can't just get to the streets in one go. The truth is, last year in South Africa, there were 23 protests on average a day in the country. 23 on average a day last year. Just in the last 2 weeks, I counted more than 10 protests that were covered in the media that had nothing to do with immigration. This country is on fire every day. The migrant movement and the anti-migrant movement is just coordinating their version of it in a way that is more visible than the other people that are struggling in this country every day. So I want us just to recognize that it is easy to light the match in this country. It is easy to shoot the bullet. The problem is, it is not as easy to douse the flame. It's not as easy. Once you have shot that missile, and I think March are figuring that out now, they've lost control of this thing, guys. The leaders don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, just like we don't know what's going to happen. Because when you put a missile out there, you have to either have the confidence that you can direct that missile, or you must know there's going to be consequences of things that you can't control. All of us here have led protests in this country before. Everyone sitting here. The reason why we do it in ways that are controlled and contained is not because we don't want this country to be ungovernable to the point that the corrupt leaders are held accountable, but because we know at the end of that chaos, the very people that we are fighting with and for will have their communities destroyed first. Because right now, I can tell you, the middle class and the rich are sitting nice in Sandton, sipping cocktails, while people in township communities are worried about whether their houses are going to stand tomorrow. Now, on the humanitarian efforts and government, we have been working in the city of Joburg for the last week, because that's really when the crisis started to emerge here about a week ago. We have seen that the Department of Home Affairs is the most active department when it comes to the response at this point, and they are assisting with the repatriation process. But I have spoken to Home Affairs officials in the last 7 days and realized that they are overwhelmed. They are overwhelmed because they are not supposed to be doing this. On a normal day, Lindela has 3,000 people at it, and those are detainees. So when you start seeing tens and thousands of people, Home Affairs was never designed for this. So they are asking for social services to get involved. They are asking for DIRCO to get involved to hold the embassies accountable. And this is also something we must say. The South African government has messed up, but so have governments across this continent that have let the people of this continent down. And they are continuing to let them down today by not being able to do repatriations in dignity. So we must put pressure on DIRCO and put pressure on every embassy to help their own people get out of harm's way. The other thing that we've seen is that there needs to be more coordinated efforts, and that politicians, and I think even the leaders of groups like March and March, are being a lot more careful at the moment about what they say, because everybody realizes that we may be sitting on a set of circumstances that have been hijacked by other elements already by now. So people are being a lot more careful, and I hope we continue to be a lot more careful. But that's what's happening in the public domain. The organizing on the ground, however, and in communities is not being as careful. And so I encourage journalists to go and spend some time in communities. Be the eyes and ears in communities that community members are being told to put their phones away, because that's where the real issues are. And I'm telling you that the leaders you think are in control and can, Herman Mashaba does not know everything that's going to happen tomorrow. He can't. And so even if he says, everybody stop, even if Jacinta says all of this must end, I don't know that they have control over everything that's going to happen. And so we're going to have a much more nuanced approach to all of this. But government officials need to be more coordinated, and especially at the level of cities.
Okay, so just want to address the question of legalities, right? Okay.
So I think this has been framed a lot around, oh, we are only against the so-called illegal people, you know? But the reality, and we've seen this isn't the first time that it happens, right? Where people are asked for documents, and when they produce an ID, they are asked, where did you get it from? And that to me is evidence. This was never about legality, right? This is about, it is a project of dehumanization, of shrinking the boundaries of who belongs and who doesn't, and of justifying harm on others, and normalizing the idea that instead of a South Africa where we can all collectively thrive, for some people to thrive, others have to be killed, removed, and eliminated. It was never about legality, rest assured. We have enough evidence showing this.
Yeah, but also I just want to build on that question because, you know, there is this idea that we don't seem to be concerned about the issues themselves, right? Of criminality and violence. And I'll tell you where the difference between us and these people actually lies in, right? We are concerned about the crisis of drug and human trafficking in our communities. Their narrative, is that it's just Nigerians, right? Just Nigerians. That's it, right? Now, ask ourselves this question if this thing was not targeted at communities. And that's what a prejudice and bigotry is about. You just target the entire population of people based on the conduct of few, right? Not even concerned about the issue itself. Now, the biggest party in all of these marches is MKP at this point in time. The biggest human trafficking story in this country is people who have been trafficked to Ukraine. We are getting body bags. And for some strange reasons, I've never seen journalists saying to leaders of March and March, how can you be so agitated about human trafficking story and be led by people who are responsible for the biggest human trafficking incident at the moment in a country? Right? Now, all I'm saying is that go get to here and then communities here. No, we're feminists. If we were to be leading a march against gender-based violence with a serial rapist at the forefront of us, many of you would have questioned us about that. Right? Why is it that nobody is as much and much? How do you say you are angry about human trafficking and you are led by the party that is actually culpable and the person making the charge is actually the leader? I mean, the daughter of the leader of that party. She's the one that filed an affidavit in KZN. The people telling us about a crime in this country are convicted against us. I mean, we're saying crime is very high. My understanding is that when you say the statistics about crime, which is true, it is very high. You are talking about the crime that would have involved gangsterism for which Gaten McKenzie has been convicted. Right? We allow somebody like that to lecture us that the problem with crime is not people like him who have been convicted. Is a woman selling tomatoes on the street. How are journalists, and maybe I'm not intelligent enough, but how are journalists in press conferences missing this obvious connection? Not say to a man, Chief, you are saying there's crime. We agree. But you are convicted of that crime. How are you not responsible with your conviction and the person that you have produced no evidence whatsoever? The whole population of people for which you have not adduced any evidence except an anecdote of few and far isolated incidences. That's a problem for us. And that's the reason we say xenophobia, because it is when you target the entire population on the basis of an act of few, and actually in the course of doing that, you actually ignore the evidence of the same criminality and the same antisocial behavior when it's committed by the very people who are bemoaning it actually and saying that others are to be blamed for it just by virtue of their identity. I think just in terms of government, we did meet with government. There were various ministers there, as I think I said in the beginning. I mean, you know, with Minister of Defense, there was Minister in the Presidency, Minister of Justice, Minister of Home Affairs, and quite a number of ministers. I mean, Cousin Machala, what is he now? DBT Minister of Police or something like that. And we raised issues, obviously, around humanitarian efforts. As I said, they said they were going to announce plans on that. We haven't seen anything that is concrete. You attended their press conference, where I think I can say that they might have probably responded. It's on the question of the 30th, because our demand was, government seemed to be going along with an unofficial recognition of the day, right? And we said they must come out clear and unequivocally saying, no, this is not our deadline. There is no such a deadline. And that is going to be an ordinary day like any other. And I think on that, I've seen there's been at least very clear and unambiguous on that. And I do think that if there's any takeaway for me in terms of their responsiveness would have been on that issue. Anything else, police operational plans, I think that will only be evident tomorrow. But I think for us, it's more than what's happening tomorrow to ensure that the thing. More than that, we are saying, we haven't seen they are saying they are going to hold any person responsible for violence responsible. But what about people inciting it? You cannot tell me that there is no connection between the assaults of the migrants, their evictions from their houses, the murders. I mean, I was attending a brand meeting of Abahlali at Lindokutle, and they were saying 3 bodies of people were found in the morning outside their thing, just outside of Jamestown there. It was a man that, from what they could see, is a Pakistani, man. Just, I mean, he's there. I think that is their report, and they could see that the reason 3 people just killed and dumped outside of their settlement, right? And these are stories that are coming out. You can't tell me that there's no connection between the rhetoric of this march and marchers and, of course, all of that. So what is really an incitement? What makes people confident that when they go and loot a spaza shop, the conduct that ordinarily will be a crime, that they think somehow is a political act, if it wasn't for all of this? Let's take questions.
Yeah, I believe there's 2 questions that have come through online. So perhaps we can take those 2, yeah?
You do. And I think we'll take issue of the language of the journalist colleagues. I think we've got to be very clear about that. I know lots of journalists imagine themselves to be different to people who enabled Rwanda genocide, that those were not journalists. They were. And all of them, it was just the other side. No, these people are raising genuine issues, all of that and so on. Hitler was enabled by journalists, by the way. Perfectly normal people, journalists that are professionals like you. So I think the whole architecture of media that is amplifying this xenophobic bigotry, I think is a cause for reflection for all the people that are in public service. Since when is hate acceptable? Are we giving the same coverage because there are people, I can tell you in this country, who are calling black people K-words. Are they the other side of the story as well? People that are saying this country is committing white genocide, are they the other side of the story? And all those things and so on. Since when do we decide that there is the other form of hate that deserve a fair chance in our public platform and others doesn't? So for me, there's got to be a reflection on that, and that is. Thank you.
So, are you able to play out the questions?
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Daniel. I'm from South African Jews for Palestine, as well as Ikwezi Labantu. My question to all of you is regarding the ways that South African citizens can hold this country accountable. I'm a Joburg resident, and with upcoming elections for mayor, we see the PA running their candidate. We see the DA running Helen Zille. We see no clear candidate for ANC yet. And right now, I'm not seeing any clear candidate who will challenge the xenophobia going on. And I see no mechanism for the average citizen to hold these leaders accountable. And I fear a post-election where purges of migrants continue, and this is kind of utilized as a rejuvenation of Johannesburg, of the seizing of property, of the seizing of jobs that were filled by migrants. So I'm just asking, what mechanisms are there for us to hold our government accountable, hold our parties accountable? Thank you.
No, thanks, Daniel. Let's take the next question as well, please. You said who, David? J-Phone. J-Phone? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, look, let me take that question briefly then. Because I think the reality is, and in many ways, this is what gives rise to a phenomenon like March and March to begin with, right? Is that there is a vacuum, a political vacuum within our communities and within our progressive movements that has resulted in a situation that enables organizations who are hateful, who misunderstand the crisis and how it emerges, and who subsequently misuse the legitimate anger of our people in order to organize people around a hateful program that really does nothing to solve the roots of our crisis, right? The reason why that can emerge to begin with is because our organizations, traditional organizations, our working class, our progressive organizations, our trade unions, our community civic organizations are generally in a much weaker state than they have been historically. And so ultimately, the conclusion that flows from that is that we need to organize. People are rallying behind what they see as some sort of righteous fight and righteous way out because the crisis in this country is simply unsustainable. And it is the crisis itself which demands that one way or another there will be uprising and revolt. There will be, wave after wave of protest and eruption of anger on the streets, which we are already seeing and have been seeing for years, right? We see that in every service delivery protest, in every community. We see it on every campus year after year where there are annual protests around fees and accommodation. We see it with every workers' strike. Right, that we are in a generalized state of revolt because the crisis is simply so unsustainable. But we need to organize that revolt on the proper program. And I think the question is a good one because it points to the fact that people are struggling to find the correct platform, the correct leader to rally behind, the party that truly represents a program that offers the kind of solutions we want to see and offers a fighting plan to push back against the escalating crisis, deepening austerity, deepening privatization, wave after wave of retrenchments and job losses and factory closures and mines being held under care and maintenance for years and years. And so what we are saying, and this is why under the SIyafana Sonke action campaign, we are not only concerned with saying no to xenophobia, and no to the methods of March and March, but we are interested in and concerned with the need to organize our communities and the need to organize our workplaces. And so really, we are calling on ordinary people in your communities, in your workplaces, in your schools, to get involved in the campaign, to start organizing on the level of street committees, on the level of strike committees, entering into trade unions, entering into civic organizations of the working class, and building the kinds of organization that we need to see to actually be able to put up a bulwark against the escalating onslaught of crisis in this country, right? But on the proper program, not on a program that has us parading the streets to terrorize poor and working class people, because ultimately that is a program that's not going to win us anything. And that is the point that we are incredibly and unapologetic clear on, is that it misses the point, right? We can come to the question of violent crime and gangsterism, and like the president was saying, Mametlwe Sebei, that for March and their leadership, the issue of violent crime and gangsterism and on drugs in particular, is blamed on migrant communities and on Nigerians in particular, right? But if we had to round up all Nigerians tomorrow and get them out the country, we've not resolved the drug issue. All we've done is perhaps open up a small portion of the drug market that will simply be captured by South Africans or by anyone else for that matter, right? So the idea that deportations and removing people is going to solve the crisis is fundamentally flawed. In fact, it's insulting to South African gangsters, as though they are incapable of selling drugs themselves. They can sell drugs and they'll tell you themselves, we're fully capable of selling drugs. And so that is the key point, right? Is that these people are misleading us. They don't understand the crisis we are confronted by, and they are not putting forward solutions that will actually resolve that crisis. And so we are not saying that we shouldn't organize. There's no way that we are going to sit here and pretend that everything is fine and that there's no fight to be waged. There is a fight to be waged. And indeed, we must organize to wage it, but we need to do so on the correct program. I don't know, David, if there was another question that came through there. Melissa, did you want to come in on one of the questions?
Okay. I want to come in on the question that are they xenophobic? The marches are xenophobic. The marches are xenophobic because I think the marches are xenophobic because of the songs that they sing. When the song that they sing, they always sing the song Hamba Shangan. That song. Who is Shangan? Shangan is a people. It's the people from Guyana, whom when they say Hamba Shangan, are they saying how Hamba Shangan, I must go where? Out of South Africa. Where must I go on that song? And then the other thing, if the community members after March and March, after the leaders of March and March came and entered the hostels, and then when they go, the community members, the hostel members, the hostel dwellers, they go outside and take people's home and say they are from outside when they are from Guyana. You will see that is very xenophobic. Even if before March and March, the people from hostels, they always say, when you speak Sepedi, they don't hear you. We are Kwereza. When they say we are Kwereza, it means it leads we are Kwereza means Kwere, and Kwere means foreigner. And then it means even if you are here in South Africa, it doesn't matter for them as long as they don't hear you, as long as they don't hear your language, as long as they don't hear what you are saying. It means we are Kwereza, and that is a very xenophobic language. We can call it xenophobia. We can call it maybe even tribalism. But their song are causing division and they are causing fear to everybody. That is why we are saying they are xenophobic.
So, I don't know if there's any final round of questions, perhaps, or should we move to conclude? Yeah. Yeah. In fact, let's take this question as well. Sorry. No.
Officials, suddenly rushing to deport people, rushing to check documents, rushing to basically conform to all the things that the March and March protesters are asking them to do. And so do you feel that by doing this, the state is telling March and other people that these methods are legitimate and encouraging this behavior?
Yeah. The final question at the back there. No?
Hi, my name's Joe Walsh. I'm a freelancer with a British newspaper called The Eye. I know, Zaki, you touched on it, but I was just wondering, you mentioned like the legitimate anger people in poor and working class communities have about the multiple crises that you've all mentioned. Why do you feel particularly that this is what has garnered the most anger in that community then? Has this been a failure from progressive politics that you haven't been able to direct this anger where you feel it should be directed at? And then secondly, just maybe on more practicalities, I think for Tessa, we've seen, the Malawian assembling outside the consulate there. Have there been other communities gathering in places across Johannesburg, and which communities and where?
Well, thank you very much. Okay, let me speak briefly to this. I'll be very quick, and then my comrades and colleagues on the panel will speak to it as well. I'm taking advantage of the fact that all of these are here in front of me currently before we shift the whole thing down the table. Yeah, look, the state and those in government, knowing full well that they are responsible for the crisis of South African capitalism in this country, that is the crisis that has destroyed basic service delivery, that has resulted in the immense concentration of the economy, which in turn is squeezing workers and seeing us lose jobs left, right, and center, and all of these things. The state is very happy to scapegoat migrants, and it has long played its own role in doing precisely that. We saw that, for example, with the massacre in Stilfontein in 2024. And the way in which the state is very happy to blame the social, political, and economic crisis on vulnerable layers in our society, and really people who are really just ordinary people trying to eke out a living in some way, shape, or form, right? And that's not to say that there aren't ways in which regulations become important, in which certain kinds of economic activity need to be regulated, supported, and all of these things, right? But it is to say that the blame for the crisis lies at the door of the government that has created it. And of course, they do not want, that kind of uprising and revolt to be directed at them, and so they are happy for that crisis to be blamed on migrants. And it is one of the one of the demands that we put forward in our meeting with the presidency and the security cluster, is that they need to be a lot more responsible in how they communicate around this issue, and in fact need to put out directives to government officials that they have to speak factually on the issue of migration in South Africa, because what you have in this current moment is in many ways a manufactured hysteria. It is really, when you look at the statistics and you look at the facts around migration, there's nothing that is necessarily abnormal about migration trends in South Africa. You can look at so many other countries around the world which have far higher migrant populations, which don't necessarily have the same anger around it, but also don't necessarily have the same kind of, generalized social collapse and systems collapse, which then creates a situation in which migrants, that the anger of society is directed at migrants, right? You look at Germany, for example. It's a country that has the landmass that is a third the size of South Africa, which has a much higher migrant population, but doesn't have the same kind of social issue. It doesn't have, you know, the same kind of collapse in social services and all of these things that we have in South Africa as a direct result of austerity budgeting, budget cuts, and corruption and the looting of public services, you know, which allows for this anger to then fester and be misdirected. And so the government has played a role there in legitimizing this kind of anger, but in fueling what is a manufactured hysteria in many ways, right? And then just to the last question there on why this is the issue that is stoking you know, public anger and bringing so much kind of momentum behind it in the current moment. I think Tessa was correct earlier that when she said that really it could be any issue in this country, right? We do see in every community, day after day, mass protests around service delivery, around water crisis, around energy crisis. You know, so we see all of these other issues that do fuel this kind of momentum, you know, at the level of the streets with people coming out to demonstrate and everything else. But really, I think the world we live in, and when we talk about the system and the system being at fault, which it is, it can also be very complex. It feels like it's up there, that it's something abstract and something that's impossible to change, right? And so it becomes a lot easier to fight someone who is living next door to you, who you can see, who you can embody the pain, hardship, precarity, and poverty that you are confronted by, right? And that legitimate anger can be expressed there and then at the level of your neighbor and the shopkeeper, you know, or someone who is in your school community or whatever it may be. And so it's easier, but that doesn't make it right. It just makes it easier. But the idea that the system stands so high above us that we can't change it is also fundamentally wrong. And I think we need people to understand that actually we are not passive bystanders watching history pass us by. We are very much an active part of history and are fully capable of turning the wheel of history and making significant, lasting, sweeping changes to the systems that govern our society. That is not impossible or unthinkable to do. It's been done in our recent history with the overthrow of apartheid, just yesterday in our lifetimes. And that can be done again, right? So while that those things seem more complex and as though they stand above us, they really don't. And so if we organize on the correct program, then the prospects that we open up to make real substantive change in this country become a lot more tangible. And we should pursue that at all times.
Okay, the government is putting oil on top of the fire because there are most the TikToks videos that they say there is no water because they make like a development in an informal settlement, and then there is no enough water because of the migrants who are living there, who are finishing water, who are finishing even electricity for the South Africans. And then it is easier to see that, okay, I don't have water and I have my neighbor who is a migrant whom I can fight with. I'm afraid to go, or I don't even have money to go to my municipality and fight with my municipality. Who is the easy target for me to fight? It's my neighbor who is next to me. And then the video that are trending when the government officials are addressing most of the things is the cause of what is happening now. People, they understand much and much easier because they know that the government officials are behind them. The police are behind them. You can see even if maybe a person is hurt, going to the police station, they don't even open cases. They tell them to go back, or they just tell them to go back to their country. There is the other one that they say, we are going to go door to door, and if we find you having migrants in your home as a tenant, we are going to fine you 10,000. It is where people become excited. They are going to go house to house using that method, but taking the money from the landlords so that they can put that money into their pocket because they know that is being set.
Okay, we're gonna take from the side.
Yeah. So just on the humanitarian crisis in the city of Joburg, I'm very reluctant to give specific places because, as I've said, we've had incidents where when we are housing migrants for safety and repatriation and humanitarian purposes, that we have groups that show up. We had a group show up at 3 a.m. in the morning. We were housing women and children. So I'm really, really reluctant to say. But what I will say is that we have had groups gather, of course, at the consulate, which is now public knowledge because the media have been there. We've had groups in the south of Joburg. We've had groups that ended up in various parts of the CBD. And we've had the group in Newlands that also made news about a week ago, was the first group that those of us in the city of Joburg that have been supporting came across. And so the real answer is it could be anywhere at any time because this is not a highly coordinated effort. It's really word of mouth spreading that there's a group that has met here. And I watched in one day on Thursday, a group that started off when I got there at 4 o'clock being 30 people become a group of 160 by the following morning. So it's as simple as that in many instances. Just on your question, Naledi, and I think for me, this is the crux of the issue, is that, as Aki has said, the state is not upset that this is happening. They're just upset it's happening on their watch because this does distract from them getting the bullets, from them being held accountable. And I think that that's part of the reason why we've seen people crowd into this issue. But there's another part to it, and it links to your question as well about why this movement and why this issue as opposed to other issues. I think that it is this kind of issue. So if the issue was water, it becomes very difficult to scapegoat water. It becomes very difficult to scapegoat electricity. It is much easier to scapegoat migration because there's a migrant on the other side that is vulnerable. And I think our politicians have leaned into that because it's politically expedient for them to do so. And it takes the blame because I've been in meetings in the last few months where March and March organizing was happening. And in those meetings were civic groups and organized formations who were organized around a variety of other issues. Particular meeting I'm referring to here, they were organizing around electricity and housing. And being an opportunity to be heard. And so when government listens, that's where people go to be heard. And you'll hear it when you hear people talking within those March and March crowds. And you ask them, why are you here? And they will say unemployment. They will say water. They will say services. And the answer that has been provided is that government listens when you basically take a group of vulnerable people like migrants and you put a gun to their head as a hostage so the government can hear you. That's where we are. So this is about politicians and government listening to this particular issue and people crowding in because they're being heard. The broader crisis of organizing in this country has honestly been that people are not being heard, not that they're not organizing. That we have become desensitized to people organizing themselves to protest. In fact, the fact that when we talk about protests in the country, we generally talk about the TAC, we talk about fees must fall, but we're not talking about communities that are organizing themselves on a regular basis around the fact that they are living in their own feces. That's the problem here. And so, yes, progressive movements have a lot to answer for in terms of not being able to really hold space for communities. But we also have to just recognize that we have gotten desensitized and way too comfortable with our politics, our politicians, government, and people not listening unless they feel it is in their interest. And right now, of course, it's in their interest because it's election. What I would say to journalists in your engagement with politicians, especially those in the city of Joburg who are campaigning on migration, ask them what their plans are for water and sanitation. Because Herman Mashaba must start to speak as passionately about water and sanitation as he does about migration. He's using somebody else's loud hailer, but he's ignoring other things that people in this country care about, and they are leaning into where somebody is listening. If people started listening elsewhere, we may have a different conversation that we're having.
Just to wrap us up, I believe that the majority of us are horrified when we see little children in the streets at night in this cold. I believe that a majority of us are horrified when we hear reports of women being forced to give birth on pavements. I believe that the majority of us are horrified to see little children being pulled out of schools. And so the appeal being made here is that we find our strength in each other and protect our communities from violence. This we do today. But tomorrow and every day thereafter, we continue to find strength in each other and build the South Africa we want. Build the South Africa we all deserve. Build a South Africa where everybody, no matter the accident of your birth, whether you are born to a family in an informal settlement or whether you are born from parents not from South Africa, you have the opportunity to thrive. And that is the appeal being made today. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, comrades of mine here on the panel, of course, members of the media, for your time and for attending this press conference. We are available as well for any individual discussions and interviews outside of this press conference itself. But let's close it there for now. Thank you again for your time.